Good morning, I'm Ben Ayers. I'm Dean of the Terry College, and I'd like to welcome you to our Terry Third Thursday series. We are here at our Terry Executive Education Center, which is the home of our executive programs, as well as our professional MBA and our executive MBA, which was recently ranked 14th in the world by The Economist, 8th in the U.S. I'd like to thank our corporate sponsor today, Bank of North Georgia. Thank you for your continued support, as well as our two media sponsors, WABE and Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Thank you for your support. I'd also like to thank Zach Deming, who's the chair of the Alumni Board Committee that puts on the Terry Third Thursday. This is a great event for us each month, and we're pleased with today's speaker and what we have coming forward next month. For this calendar year, we have one more speaker, which will be in November. It's Charles Stokes, and Charles is the president and CEO of the CDC Foundation. In the month of December, we'll take a break, and we'll turn back in January with David Cummings, who's a partner with Atlanta Ventures. In December, we'll begin our Georgia Economic Outlook at the Atlanta Marriott Marquis, and that's on December the 11th. There we'll provide a forecast for the state of Georgia and for the U.S., and it's provided by the Seelig Center for Economic Growth, which is housed in the Terry College. I hope that you'll join us for that event. It's a great event each year for us. It is my honor to introduce this morning's speaker, Tony Maddox, who's Executive VP and Managing Director of CNN International. He's based here in CNN's headquarters in Atlanta. And he's responsible for international news, information portfolio that includes 5 CNN services in English, CNN in Español, joint ventures for CNN-IBN, CNN Turk, CNN Chile, CNN Philippines, and CNN Indonesia. He's also responsible for international news gathering, editorial, and programming oversight. Under his leadership, CNN has received many prestigious awards, and here are a couple of those. The Royal Television Society's News Channel of the Year, and that's twice received. The George Foster Peabody Award, an Emmy Award, and the Edward R. Murrow Award, which has been received 3 different times. In 2011, Tony spearheaded the launch of the CNN Freedom Project, Ending Modern-Day Slavery, the longest-running awareness and investigative campaign on modern slavery on a global news channel. In July of this year, Tony was one of 8 individuals who were honored by the U.S. State Department for his sustained commitment to raising public awareness and understanding of human trafficking on a global scale. He also has planned CNN's content ownership strategy, which resulted in a significant increase in CNN's editorial operations worldwide and has doubled the size of the international news source. Prior to joining CNN, Tony worked for the BBC, where he held various positions, including reporter, news producer, and editor, and ran one of the first teams of local bi-media correspondents in Leeds. This is CNN. Please cue the video.
We got intelligence that there was an IED maker.
Shields or riot gear.
With the stars in the sky tonight.
Taking all of you behind the scenes as the votes are counted.
Make you feel like there is
end of the corridor.
We're here now at the peak of the storm.
And if the world spins upside down, no
We're flying over ISIS front lines.
just a ride. And if you lose yourself, don't worry.
It's dangerous. They're shelling there.
I'll see you on the other side. From where you are. From where
Told to get to a shelter.
Gas being fired all over the place.
The biggest obstacle in trying to find the plane is the weather.
Now I'm hearing gunfire.
They've never seen anything like this.
Heads of state from all over the globe.
This is a historic day for France. Take a look around. You can support the president.
Are pushing people back. We're being detained right now.
Are we in a war with radical Islam?
Thank you, everybody. I'd like to start with you all imagining yourself in a certain situation. I'm going to give you a couple of options, and we'll come back later as to what you think is the right thing to do. I'll make this a bit easier for you by telling you there is no right or wrong option. There's just the one that we took and the other option available. You're in your office. It's about 3:15 in the afternoon, and you get a phone call, and a difficult, very dangerous CNN assignment has taken an unexpected and unwelcome turn. You've got a reporter in a part of Africa which is completely run by Boko Haram, the fundamentalist group. The reporter is following up a story of some schoolgirls who've been abducted. You've been offered a facility earlier in the day to go in with the police to this village. No one's been there yet, certainly no other media organizations. Even the police and military don't want to go. But earlier in the day they said, well, actually we can get in and out of this village in a day. You can interview the key people, you can speak to some of the parents, you can even go to the school, but we're going to get in and get out really quickly. Very difficult access via road. And the police and the army are terrified because they know they're overwhelmed and outnumbered. This is the hub of the story. This is why you went. This is what you want to do. Your reporters really, really, really want to go. And they said, we can get in, we can get out in a day. We'll be fine. Daytime, we'll be fine. So the phone call you get at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which is alarming to you because you think, well, this is like 9, 10 in the evening out of Nigeria. Why are they calling now? Is your reporter saying there's been a change. The police and army are not happy about leaving today. They think we've got to stay here overnight. It's gotten dark, things have gone astray, so we've got to spend the night here. And we have two options. We can stay with the police and the army and the barracks that they have. The upside of that option is that we'll be with the police and the army. They are armed. There is some protection around the barracks, although not much. Downside with that option is that the police and the army could actually be a prime target. And so far, a lot of the police and the army haven't shown a great willingness to fight against Boko Haram. So we could actually be putting ourselves in line of sight. The alternative is that we find a family in the village and stay with them, hide in plain sight. The risk of that is obvious. There is no protection there at all. And for all we know, Boko Haram sympathizers in the village could tip people off that we're there. The plus side is that it's not a prime target in the way in which the police or army is. So, Tony, what do you think we should do? So I'll leave that with you. Contemplate over your breakfast, and we'll come back to it later. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to speak to you as a group. I'm very flattered and very pleased to have that. Thank you. You got like the very glittering PR sort of bio of me, so I won't add anything to that. Just go believing I am that guy, because I am not, but there we are. A little bit of personal information. Some of you probably gathered already that I'm not a Georgia boy. I have actually lived here since 2004. I'm an American citizen, season ticket holder to the Falcons, and not so much for the Braves. How hard can it be to hit a ball, I always think when I watch baseball? Make that ball bigger or the bat bigger or something, but you know, we've got to have something going on here. I've been at CNN since 1998. I joined in London. Prior to that, my immediate job prior to that was in Belfast in Northern Ireland during the difficult time in the Troubles in the 90s. Well, Troubles preceded that, but I was there during the 90s. So what I want to do today is, let me tell you what today is and what today isn't, if you like. I want to give people a sense of CNN-I, what it is that we do and how we fit in the overall CNN family. I know this is a pretty CNN-aware audience, but even within the CNN-aware audience, what different parts of CNN do and how their work is structured is worth just spending a few minutes explaining that. I then want to talk about three key values: trust, empathy, and courage. There's many, many, many values that are important in the job that I do. I just find that these three keep coming back. So the high-tech leadership is trust, empathy, and courage. And give three examples which tap into all of these things, but I'm going to draw one of those out of the three examples. What this is not is a demonstration of how smart and clever we were and how we always get everything right. What it actually is a real-time example of decisions that we made, some of which, if we revisited them, we might do a bit differently, but things which we learn from. And then I want to close with something I find myself doing a lot with folks who I work with, which is just, you know, lessons that have sort of come through to me through being in this business for 30 years, through the leadership role that I have and the challenges that we faced. Some of these will be quite obvious and things you'll be familiar with before. Some of them are probably a bit more idiosyncratic, but there's something which means something to me. Then off the back of that, we'll do some Q&A. So let's briefly sort of rattle through CNN-I. CNN-I operates as a distinct entity within CNN. We do our own distinct programming. We carry about 3 or 4 hours of domestic programming. Domestic carries about 3 or 4 hours of our programming in the overnight hours. But if you travel around the world, you travel outside the US, you're going to see CNN International. Launched in 1985, just a straight feed of the International News Service. Came of age with the Gulf War in 1991. Worth bearing in mind, our international distribution in 1991 was about 7 million, and now it's about 280 million. We are massively bigger than we were then. But crucially, all domestic broadcasters carried CNN during the first Gulf War. I was at the BBC, and we were running CNN all the time at that time. So now 286 million households. We are literally in every country in the world, and we're still growing. One of the things that's interesting to people is people tend to assume that multi-channel television is sort of a bit passé and everything's digital now. Multi-channel television is still growing all around the world in many sort of emerging and growing markets, and CNN is always has a value in those marketplaces, so it's still a growth business. The good thing that our ad sales people will tell you is that we have a lot of rich viewers. We are normally viewed in a second language. English is a second language. If you think about it, most people in the world don't speak English, so you're automatically dealing with an educated audience, a high business traveling audience, and we get far more viewers than the BBC, which is our primary rival. And I always mention Al Jazeera because people always ask about it. In terms of viewers, outside the Middle East, it isn't an entity. So quickly, the average age of a Fox viewer is, I think, 250, 260. The average age of NBC and MSNBC and CNN's around 60. Ours is 41. So it's a completely different demographic to which we're broadcasting. We're actually very big with the 18 to 34-year-olds. These are people who view the world far more globally than older generations. They are going to work abroad, going to study abroad, going to meet people from abroad, spend time abroad. They just have a much bigger interest in global issues, global terrorism, the fate of the environment, stuff which just transcends national borders. So the younger it gets, the better. 83% have got a university degree or higher. 66% of our audience travel internationally in some shape or form. And of course, these stats are very big and broad. There are a cult of people who watch us all the time. They're virtual permanent road warriors. And the first thing they do is put CNN on. And it's like a small, not that small, but a group of people who watch us everywhere. And they know the network as well as any of us do. High level of senior positions. We did this presentation about 6 months ago. I guarantee you that's out of date already. Incredible consumption via smartphone, digital devices, and iPads. So 286 million households. Something which surprises people, 85% of people watch CNN International watch it at home. People tend to assume we're a hotel service. We're not. People tend to assume we're an expat service. Expats are less than 1% of our business, and we don't make any money out of them. We don't put the service together for Americans who are out of country. 67% male, 33% female. That's not great, but that sort of reflects that demographic internationally, unfortunately. Rich, growth in Africa, Europe, and Asia, and we just dominate the surveys that there are in ours. We don't have a Nielsen rating, which is like a good and a bad thing, but in the surveys that are available, we just clean up. So we'll talk about all the parts that I manage. At the moment, I actually manage this as a business, which many of you here will be familiar with. I'm responsible for the P&L inside my business. I'm preparing the budget presentation at the moment for next year. And I could have done a presentation on that, but believe me, you wouldn't have wanted to see it. But what I want to draw down here is probably one of the more unique parts of my job. And in talking about my job over a period of time, it's clear that certain people are interested in certain parts more than others. And really, it's the hardcore international news gathering, which is where the job comes alive for me, and it's the place where some of our most vivid lessons are learned. We have fantastic international journalists. Anyone who stands up here says, I've got a great team, I've got a great team, I've got a great team, and everyone says that and everyone believes it. Well, I do. I mean, this is the murderer's row, if you like, of international correspondence. Everybody wants to be on this team. Everybody else wants to hire these people. We're constantly having to sort of work to sort of bat off other agents and everything else. They're the good as it gets. You get a top job like this on CNN, you get one to be one of our starting 5. You're the best in the world. It's as simple as that. You're the best in the world. But they're also a challenge to manage, because these people are incredibly brave, and they're courageous, and they're tenacious, and they're determined, and they're passionate, they're cunning, they're clever, and they don't just turn that off when they come out of the field. They're like that all the time. So as a team to manage, they're second guessing you, they're trying to sort of manipulate you, they're trying to work around you, which is good. You want them to have these qualities, but it does also make them a challenge to manage. You've got to manage them in a certain kind of a way. If you can't command the respect of these people, you're dead. It just isn't going to happen. So as we've worked through this, we go to the next slide. If we work through this, I've sort of spent some time distilling down that at the heart of the relationship is trust, empathy, and courage. Now, there's many other values that pervade in this as well, but for me, these have sort of come through time after time after time of being at the heart of what it is we do. If you work in a complex matrix organization, you've got to learn how to trust. And when I say you've got to learn how to trust, I truly believe it is a learned behavior. I think necessarily many of us, let's face it, it's an ego-driven job, it's an alpha kind of profession. You always think, I want to control this, I want to manage this, I've got to be in charge of this, and you can't do it. You can't manage things with that level of micromanagement. You simply have to be able to trust. One of the secrets of success, I'll come back to that later. It's not really a secret of success, I call it a secret of not getting fired, is learning how to get things done in areas where you don't have any real power. And learning how to do that in a way which doesn't piss everyone off. That sounds simple, but that's basically at the heart of it. So it's trust. It's about empathy, that ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's again, it's a learned behavior. For me, maybe some people are naturally more empathetic, but I literally have to, how does the world look from this person's point of view? What is important to them right now? What's driving their behavior? What do they need to hear from me? What's happening in their heads? I always make this point when I'm talking to people when they're sometimes in conflict with another department or with another individual, and I talk about empathy. And people are often cross and angry. I don't empathize with that bastard. He did this, he did that, he did the other. But it's not about sympathizing. It's important to differentiate. It is about empathizing. It's about giving people a pass. But it is about understanding why other people have done what they've done, because you're then in a much better position to be able to cope with that and manage that. And the third part is courage. And so what we'll see here are some examples of outstanding physical courage, immense personal bravery. But I don't want to overemphasize that a key part of success is the willingness to go into a war zone. That's not what I mean at all. I think it's the courage of convictions is really what it's about. We do a lot of work with a couple of security companies who are all ex-special forces. And one of the guys there made a really good point to me. He said, courage is often misunderstood. The bravest people are the ones who can manage their anxieties. So if you fly from Atlanta tonight to London, there'll be like 300 people on that plane. There'll be people like you who are sort of reading, don't even know when the plane's taken off or landed, watch a movie, go to sleep and everything else. There'll be few people on that plane who've been dreading that flight for months. They're absolutely terrified from the moment it takes off. Every bump and shake of that plane, they're about to have a heart attack. They'll be literally physically sweating. They might even be nauseous. And they get off at the other end. Now, you've both been exposed to exactly the same risk. You didn't really sort of comprehend it at all. This other person needs to sit down with a glass of water and get over it. That is courage. The courage is the ability to be so afraid, but to be able to do it anyway. Not feeling anxiety about something isn't courage at all. So it's about that part of courage. It's about being able to manage doing the difficult thing, the thing you don't want to do. So we'll talk about that. So let's go on to the first of these examples. So this is where I started. This is our reporter, Nema. And she's in a place called Chibok. This is where 200 girls were abducted. You remember Bring Back Our Girls, the campaign we were right at the forefront of. So we decided as a group that if we didn't report this story, it could easily get lost. Whereas if CNN went, we would have the CNN effect. CNN goes to a story, it can impact a story and can change a story. So we were quite clear about this. We wanted to raise the profile of this story. We didn't want people to forget about it. We won a lot of awards for our coverage there. Nema and Aisha Sisse, who is the anchor, both are women of African origin. Aisha was doing the anchoring out of Abuja and just beating the living daylights out of these various complacent generals and politicians who frankly just wanted us to go away and shut up about this. And Nema was the tip of the spear. She went right into where the story was. So I gave you an example at the start of some of the dilemmas that this operation presented to us. Who thinks we should have stayed with the police and the army as a make it safe? Show of hands, big hands right in the air. Right? I emphasize there is not a right or wrong answer here. Who thinks you'd make it safe with a family? Interesting. This doesn't always get the same level of response. Can we just play the tape on this?
Nightfall in Chibok, and with it, the fear returns, bringing back memories of when nearly 300 girls were abducted here.
It's at night that people here say they feel most vulnerable, most abandoned by the outside world, which is why they've started going on nightly patrols like this. Ever since that horrifying night of April 14th, the men here have come together, each bringing what they could, machetes, homemade bows and arrows, trying, hoping that they will be able to protect their families.
And it was very dark, but the sound of gunshot, explosions everywhere.
Daniel Muvia and his family witnessed the terror firsthand.
We have to run into the bushes for our lives. So it was a horrifying night. Fear is all over. Fear is everywhere.
Daybreak does bring respite, but the burnt-out school stands as a reminder of the sheer scale of the devastation. Nearly a month since the night when the radical Islamist group Boko Haram stormed this town, more than 200 of the girls are still missing. Tired of waiting for help to arrive, fear is making way here for resilience.
We're told it was 4 terrifying hours of gunfire, grenades and looting as the villagers here cowered in the bush. But as you can see, life in Chibok is already returning to some semblance of normal. The reality is, as we've heard from the people we've been speaking to here, that with no end in sight to the continuing Boko Haram attacks, the villagers say that they've had to learn to pick themselves up and just get on with their lives. Ni'mal Bagher, CNN, Chibok.
So I wanted to play that film in full because I think it's important to understand this is why we do it. We can sit and talk about this in the studio till our heads fall off. You can read about it online. You've got to go. CNN has a slogan saying, go there. If you can find a way, you've got to go there. And I think that piece was one of the more powerful pieces that we ran all year. You will notice that Nema was out on patrol with people. This was after a conversation with me in which I said, yes, stay with one of the families, but keep a low profile. Sure, I'll go out on patrol. This is what I mean, the people I manage, you know? And to be fair, what I did say with her is, you know, you've got to make the judgment here on the ground. It sounds to me like you're probably better off with a family, but you've got to be comfortable with that. I can't tell you what to do, but in what you've mapped out to me, I think we want to keep away from the police and the army. The police and the army had even been infiltrated as far as we were concerned, so they could have even handed us over. So I just figured, you know, better the devil you don't know in some respects in this regard. And when she was there with the family, she suddenly realized the family they were staying with had suddenly grabbed machetes and stuff and were going out on a night patrol. So we might as well go with them then. And so that was the piece. But for me, that was where trust came in. I had to trust that team completely. They had to trust us that we got their back. We were monitoring them with all kinds of electronic monitoring and devices. What happened after the back of that assignment was very quickly we heard that we'd been rumbled and that Boko Haram knew we were there, and that they said they were going to come and get us. We don't know if that was true. But what we then had to do was mobilize a really quick out, and we got a jet on standby at Maiduguri Airport. So we drove our own way back out to this airport and literally got on the jet and back to Abuja. And as we were getting on the jet, the BBC were just arriving, which was delightful for us because we were pathetically, childishly competitive. And it's like, yeah, good luck with that. It's getting a bit heavy back there. See ya. I've just filed my award-winning piece. Good luck, John Simpson. So that was a challenge there. This is a different one. We planned for that. We planned in a great deal of detail for Nigeria, and we tried to monitor it as best we could to allow what goes on. This is an example of a situation which many people could find themselves in. Well, not many, but sometimes it can happen. So you remember the bombing of the hotel in Mumbai in India? A horrible death toll of 150, 160 people killed. Terrorists went into the hotel. Well, we were staying at the hotel. We had a team in India staying at the hotel. And when I saw that there'd been an attack, we'd actually had a call through to our international desk who coordinate all these things. By the way, I should have said this more at the start, repeat on this. I'm doing this presentation. Many people are involved in this decision making and running all these operations. This is not a me thing at all. I'm to lead this team. So on our international desk, we got a call through from our team saying, we think there might be some kind of armed robbery at the hotel. It looks like it's really going down. And we were like, well, thank God we're not in the hotel. You know, that could have been terrible. And things went really, really bad from there because we had our reporter outside. So let me just show you what we were dealing with in terms of this story.
Yes, in favour, over your right shoulder. Who's taking Sarah? We've got some good pics here. Wow, Sarah.
You can like for backstory, and you can take shots of the thing. Just
This isn't a report.
bad.
This is just footage of what we were dealing with, and we were seeing this in the office. Obviously, we packaged some of this that went up for air. This is the Taj Mahal Hotel, the biggest hotels and a big sort of tourist, old key business people stay there.
Hey, if they can get me on the air, we just had a huge blast here at the Taj Hotel. Huge blast. Okay.
So in this hotel, we knew that the terrorists had gone into the hotel with machine guns, killed everyone in the lobby, and they'd worked their way up the floors, worked their way through the floors. We had a team outside. What I didn't know, what none of us knew, was actually we had a team inside. The way CNN works is we have a commercial group called Turner International who do all our marketing, PR, etc. So our team that was there was actually a features team. We were doing some feature work there. And this marketing and PR team had done some business functions around our team being there. So this, like I emphasized, it was ad sales, it was marketing, it was PR. We had 4 people trapped inside the hotel. We didn't immediately know that because they weren't our team. So it was only when our team on the ground who were outside said, actually, we think the TI people who they've been hanging out with are inside the hotel. So we started ringing all these numbers and we found out, yes, they were trapped inside the hotel. This was a nightmarish situation. The hotel, on many floors, was full of terrorists who were going up killing everyone they could find as they worked up the floors. The Indian Army and police went in and they were shooting anyone who they thought was a terrorist. Our people were trapped inside their rooms. Explosions were going off. So they all called me. We set up like a conference call where all 4 of them were on with me on one phone, and separately on another phone I had the entire senior executive team of Turner waiting for me to brief them on what was happening, because this was their folks really. It wasn't within their department. It was the day before Thanksgiving. It's one of the most stressful afternoons of my entire life. And so original guidance in this is stay where you are, stay put. Don't try and run out of this hotel, because the terrorists will see you and shoot you. Or if the terrorists don't see you and shoot you, there's a good chance the army and the police will, because they'll just assume you're a bad guy because you're running through the hotel and they're all primed and pumped, and it's all very well saying they won't shoot civilians, but you never know what some kid's going to do when someone comes running down a smoky corridor towards him. So I was talking to all 4 of these people, and this is about empathy. This is about what do they need to hear from me. What they need to hear from me is this is going to be fine. You're going to get out of this. You're going to be fine. There's certain things you can do to help make yourself safe. One of the things that they did was move the fridges to the door. That isn't going to stop anyone determined. It just makes your door harder to open than someone else's. So if someone's running down a corridor and they've got a pass and you open it and stuck against a fridge, it might go to the next one, might not. Anything you can do to increase your chances in those circumstances. One sort of lighter moment in this was one of the ad sales guys was there, and he said to me, you know, Turner has this policy about not using the mini bar. And I said, yeah, we can suspend that for this afternoon, you know. That's probably, you believe me, when you put in your expenses claim, put in the background circumstances, no one's going to push back on that. There's little things you can do in those circumstances. You get people to run the bath and fill it up with water, because water might get cut off. You might be stuck there for a long period of time. Quite seriously, as far as the mini bar is concerned, you say to people, you know, if you've got energy bars in there, if you've got nuts and stuff like that in there, don't eat it all at once. You know, we might need to sort of, you know, ease some of this out. So that was the plan. We would dig in. The problem we had was that explosion was on the same floor as our people. And then smoke started coming in the room, and that hotel was on fire. At which point I was thinking, what next? You know, is it going to get invaded from outer space? I mean, how can we make this any more difficult? And then it was clear from the people that I was talking to that they absolutely wanted to get out. There's something about being presented with smoke and fire and noise like that. It's just a flight instinct. And it became clear to me that if we didn't control their exit, they'd try and do an exit on their own. There's only so much you can do on a phone in Atlanta with someone who's in a hotel full of terrorists that's on fire and exploding in India. So I said, okay, we'll reset this. We're going to get you out. But we're all going to leave at the same time. So on our cue, you go. And we got permission from the Indian authorities to pull a car right up outside the main entrance to the hotel lobby. And then we had one of these moments, which is a movie moment really, where we're standing in the middle of the international desk and everybody's on these phones monitoring these people. And it was literally like 3, 2, 1, go. And the instruction was you go straight down the stairs, don't go in the elevators, get to the lobby, get out. Everyone's got a map in their room of how to get out. Every hotel in the world has it, certainly the top quality hotels. Study that, know where your exit is, go down there. So we have 4 people who were all active at once. First guy hit the car in about 45 seconds. Next person hit it in about a minute. The next person was there about 1 minute 15. It was actually people shouted across the room, mine's in, mine is in, mine is in. We had a fourth one, and it was a movie moment, just 1 minute 30, 1 minute 45, 2 minutes, and then the driver saying, like, I'm really not comfortable about hanging around out here, and we're saying, just give it a bit longer. It's about 2:15, the fourth person arrived in the car, and they blasted away, and they all got out of it. Now, I don't share this story because, you know, we did so well or we were so clever. We did get our people out. I've reflected on this many times. Actually, the hotel didn't burn down. The Indian authorities took control of the hotel back within 24 hours. They would have been fine if they'd stayed where they were. But we didn't know that at the time. And they didn't know that at the time. And there's no doubt in my mind that if we hadn't done a controlled exit, we would have had an uncontrolled exit, in which case they would have been running around the hotel, there wouldn't have been anyone to pick them up, anything could have happened. So it was the least worst option for me. And there are people who said, no, we should have stayed put, we should have reassured people, we should have stayed put. And that's, you know, in the end, that would have also have worked. Probably, frankly, would have been less risk. But for me, it was the empathy that we had within that situation. Let's bring up the next one, please. This is the final one that I will talk you through as an example of courage. And this is probably the single most high-risk assignment that we've run at CNN. We had our eyes wide open when we went in. This was at an earlier stage in the war in Syria in February 2012. At this point, it became clear that Assad was starting to bomb his own people in Homs. And at that point, that was who's surprised by that? Back then, that was quite a big thing. And the rebels offered us access into Homs. It was going to be incredibly dangerous. We had to basically crawl along a storm drain for a mile to get in to this place where they would pick up with us and we would then stay in Homs. The kind of bombing we were getting was mortar bombing, aerial bombing. No control or precision to it, so literally you could have been hit anywhere. But our reporter, our Damon, is one of the very best. So listen, we can show the world what's really happening inside Syria. We can get in and out in 24, 48 hours. We've got to do this story, and we agreed that we would. She handpicked the crew based on how fit they were, the security guy, and we went in. Let's just take a quick look at all there. This is all we're talking about.
Plans were revived to get a CNN team into Homs. Along with our Damon, Neil Hallsworth, a veteran cameraman who has faced the worst in Iraq, Afghanistan and Israel. And handling security, Tim Crockett, former British Special Forces and an expert in balancing safety with frontline news coverage.
For me, that was a very experienced, highly accomplished team. These are determined, forceful, strong-willed individuals, but they're also smart individuals.
We got the call, so we just had to refresh the same sort of things. Look, what are we trying to achieve? How long are we going to go for?
Now, for instance, on a normal trip, I'd probably take anything up to 10 cases, 12 cases. This, I had a backpack, basically.
We mapped out, literally mapped it out in every sense.
Do we have the right communication system? How are we going to track this team?
Who are we going with? How are we getting there?
If someone gets injured, what are we going to do? But I will say this. With all the preparation we do and all the things we set up and all the backstops we have, you're going into a war zone. You are on your own.
I went to see my mom when it seemed like this trip was going to materialize. My dad was out of town, but I went to see my mom and I spent some time with her, and I actually wrote a letter for the first time to my family. And I went to see some very close friends as well, just in case.
I didn't really go and say goodbye to anyone or anything like that, but it's probably one of the reasons I didn't, because I didn't want to think of it like that. So I tried to block that part of it out of my mind, really.
We sat down as a team, we talked it through, and at each point we sort of weighed up, what are we trying to achieve here, what could happen.
We went into it knowing the risk we were taking, and we were prepared to do that for the story.
Every scenario considered, meticulous planning, but ultimately, Neil and Tim would have to rely on others on their journey into a city under siege.
So there was a documentary we made about how we actually did it. We thought it would be an interesting sort of, behind the curtain look at how we put these things together. So we went in, we had extraordinary reporting right in the teeth of this bombardment. We were there we saw there how long we're going to be in for. We've been there for about 2 days, 2.5 days. This might sound a somewhat brutal assessment, but I took the view that after 2.5 days, the piece is all beginning to look the same. This is a place that living daylights bombed out of it. The risk-reward, the reward was very high, the risk was very high, but the reward was more of the same in terms of many of the producers. I was having to push people to run some of these stories. So I said to the team, we need to get out. Arwa didn't want to come out. Arwa was, we're with these people, they've risked a life to get us here. I said to Arwa, we've done what we set out to do. You bought the exposure to this story. We're now prolonging the level of risk, and the risk is escalating. And she agreed. This is courage on both sides. It was unbelievable courage to go in. It's also the courage to know when you're going to come out as well. Courage to know when you've done what you can achieve. So as we were coming out, a Sunday Times team was coming in, and the journalist for the Sunday Times was a lifelong hero of ours. And Arwa was just thrilled to meet them, and she was said to Arwa, I think you've done outstanding work. We've all been watching your work. It was like a really big moment. And that was another reason I was, why are we leaving now? They've just arrived. But we did. They got like an improvised motorbike that pulled people along on this drain. We came out through this system. We got everyone back out. 12 hours later, the house we were in with the Sunday Times journalist was bombed, and the Sunday Times journalist was killed. It was just dumb luck. We didn't know it was going to get bombed or didn't know it was going to get hit, but we were literally 12 hours away. And as the team came out and we were all jubilant, suddenly we got this news that the house that we'd been in had been bombed and killed. So know what your mission parameters are, but don't get carried away with courage. Have the courage to say we're going to stop now. Have the courage to say no, and something like that. On to the next page. So I'm just going to do a quick sort of 5-minute whistle through this. I actually can sometimes do a complete presentation on this. But sometimes people say, could you sort of, if you're giving like sort of 10 takeaways from mistakes that you've made, everything I've learned, with all of you, has been mistakes I've made, stuff I've gotten better at. What guidance would you give to people? Broaden your view and understanding by working internationally. I think that's fantastically important. If you get the opportunity at any time to do it, do it. Number 2 is a point that people would laugh in my face from early in my career about, but never underestimate the overwhelming value of kindness. I wish I'd been kinder to people more often, much earlier on. I now make an effort to do it wherever I can, and I encourage others to do it. It pays back in terms of your own personal sense of satisfaction and growth, but also, materially it pays back as well. People remember people who are kind, and they remember people who are unkind. They may remember if you're kind, they never ever forget you being unkind. Exhibit fortitude and resilience. Things will go wrong. I explain this to everyone, and it's another reason why you should be kind to people. I don't care who you are. I don't care how clever you are. I don't care what kind of genius you are. Shit is going to go wrong for you. And at some point, it's going to go wrong in a hurry. And at that point, you'll reap the return on those investments. Invest time in your colleagues, with the team that I work with, those kind of people. Most important thing we can give to anyone is our time. And it's the time spent understanding to them, listening to them, letting them debrief, let them have a moan and a bitch about stuff that got to them, but make sure that they've got the time and they know that they have that time from you. Failure happens when you do not know the effect you have on others. I'm a great believer in this. Everybody now talks about self-awareness. Oh yes, my most important characteristic is self-awareness. I used to, I'll try and, this is quite a knowledgeable crowd, so I'll distance my person. I work with some people who think they're very self-aware and absolutely are not. I don't think any of us are as self-aware. It's like the ultimate irony, really. Self-awareness is really important, and you just don't know yourself at all. Take every opportunity you can to get, feedback about yourself, negative feedback about yourself. Find out what it is that you do that pisses people off. Try and do it less if you can. We're all what we are at this point in our lives, but we can at least try and self-manage better. A question I always ask in interviews, I've said here, identify the most pivotal moment of your career. Actually, I'm much more direct in interviews. What did you screw up really, really badly? How did that happen? When did you realize things had gone so badly wrong? Why had you made those decisions? What did you do about it then? How have you modified your behavior since? I don't say it to unsettle people, although it is an unsettling question. For me, it's the most important question you can ever ask of anyone. Can people identify their own role in something that went astray? The truth of it is, for most of us, if you're involved in something like that, there are other parties involved. And it's the easiest thing in the world to say, yeah, well, he didn't do that, and she didn't do that, and that department let us down here, and they didn't do that. Which may all be true, but you're not going to learn anything by learning what other people could have done better. What could you have done better there? How could you learn from that? What can you take away from that? It's tough, but it's really important. And I'm not hiring anyone who hasn't got a good answer to that question. I'm just not hiring anyone who hasn't got a good answer to that question again. Develop self-awareness, learn how to see it and how to accept and process feedback. One of the things people often say to me is, I want more feedback, I want more feedback. A point to make to them is, you get feedback all the time. And you're dealing with people, you're in a room, they're giving you feedback. They might sit down and say, here's a feedback session, Tony, you need to write this differently, you need to structure this, you need to shorten this. That's great when you can get those sessions. But people, I'm getting feedback from this room, you all are getting feedback all the time, just open yourself up to it. Manage emotional investment. I've got various more broad language ways of focusing this, but there are people out there who will eat you alive. They'll just drive you nuts. And one of my old bosses once said to me, consider your emotions like money. You can only spend them on so many things, and once it's gone, it's gone. And if you choose to overinvest in someone who drives you nuts, who makes you angry, who distracts you, you haven't got the money left and the emotion left for the other more important things. So control your investment. Sometimes you've got to spend some money on it. It's the utility bill. You've got to pay the damn thing, but make sure that you've budgeted for that and you've got the budget for the things you really care about. Don't let other people drive your time. If you do, it's on you. They are going to be an idiot because they're an idiot. And you might have told them to stop being an idiot, but they won't stop because they are what they are. At that point, it's up to you to decide how much time this idiot is going to take up from you. And if you decide to make them ruin your day, that's on you, not on them. They're an idiot. make time for yourself. We have a lot of people who are intensely committed. These folks who do this job that we do, they can take you over. It's a conviction, and so it's so important that we try and find, times where they can do what it is that they want to do. And it doesn't really matter what that is, but as long as it's not work related and it's focused on them and it's not destructive, make sure that you're encouraging people to do that all the time and constantly saying, tell me how's the football going, how's the fly fishing going, whatever it might be, but just the other things that you want people to get involved in. And then finally, think, know, and feel. I'm a great believer in this when I'm talking to people and managing people. Now, there is what I might think about what someone has said or someone has done. There's what I might know about that, but by far and away the most important thing is, how do I feel about that? I might know some good information about a person. I might think that they're trying to do the right thing, but something doesn't feel right. Always be connected to that. Always be connected to how that feeling goes. On that, I'll sort of wrap and take any questions that anyone has. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Tony, so much of what you talked about is around talent and leadership. You outlined a couple of issues that you face. You're dealing with these crazy mavericks that are probably unique personalities to manage. What are some other talent challenges that you guys face? Be it, is this something that people still really want to do? What do you face most every day that makes your job difficult?
It's often interesting that people assume, because they wouldn't want to do it, that other people don't want to do this high-risk kind of assignment. Actually, by far and away, my biggest challenge is that they're all got these, madcap assignments all the time that they're bidding for, and they're competing with each other, because we can only do so many of these, particularly the more big in-field operations. You saw Cindy and Parisa talk on there about how we coordinate that and the number of staff. It takes about 5 or 6 people to oversee these things once they're in field, so you can only do so many at any one time. So if I pick yours, I can't pick yours. And once people don't get their assignment picked, they ain't very happy about that at all. And then they'll sort of, they'll then say, I've got a new assignment. Actually, yes, you were quite right, Tony. Your genius came to the fore in spotting the flaws of that previous plan. I've now got a plan which addresses all of those things. And you read through it, this is exactly the same plan as before, but just written in a different way. So what the talent thing is that these people all want game time. They're like prime time sort of athletes, and they want to be in the middle of things. They want the ball all the time, and everybody wants the ball all at once. So you've got to manage these competing sort of egos and personalities. By and large, people play nice when they're out together. We have 2 or 3 people who just don't, particularly with each other. And so literally for me, when I see some of these people in assignment together, it's like, the IDF and Hamas. It's like, oh my God, get them apart. No good will come of this. So you do have to manage through that. There's budgets, of course. I'm in the middle of the budget process like everyone else. Now, I would say, to credit to Time Warner, to Turner, I have never been in a big breaking news situation or difficult situation where someone has said to me, what about the budget? We need to pull this for budgetary reasons. I've made the decision sometimes on the rate of return because we just can't keep spending the money endlessly. And I'm enormously grateful. This sounds rather kiss-ass, but I'm very straight about it. I'm enormously grateful that I work for a company that has continued to invest in this. This company could spend money more effectively than it does on this. CNN is a very profitable company. CNN-I is a very profitable part of CNN. But still, in terms of, if you were to take, billions of dollars on one thing or billions of dollars on something else, you could probably get a higher rate of return. And the commitment to this has been very encouraging. But I'm still always cognizant of the budget. So there's the budget, there's the egos, the personality, and the aspirations of the people. They're all the things that sort of need to be managed. And you've always got to be aware that, if Arwa has done a big thing like that and everyone in the company saying Arwa is great, there's 2 or 3 people out there saying, oh, it's terrific, bitch. Right. Here's my pitch, you always got to manage that. Yes, sir. It is, yes. I mean, I think it's a very perceptive question. We often deal with these issues where, you know, we'll get some footage and you can describe what is happening, but the perspective on that varies enormously depending on where you happen to be in the world or how you happen to see it. We aspire overall to try and do this in a fair and even-handed way, because it would be counterproductive for us to do it in another way, but that doesn't mean people will see it like that. I'll give you an example of something that's ongoing at the moment. So the Russian bombing in Syria. Russia has a very tight control on Russian media, and it's very pro-Putin, very pro what Putin wants to do. Anyone who's really seriously anti-Putin doesn't get much purchase in Russia, might not even have much liberty. So the coverage in Russia of this campaign in Syria has been all, you know, go, go, rah, rah. And before we get too high-minded about that, it's what the US military attempt to do as well. They've been releasing lots of footage of smart bombs and rockets and guys getting on and off planes and all that kind of stuff, and they've just been running that. We've run some stuff which has been critical of the campaign, from people who've said, you know, they're going after the rebels instead of going after ISIS, that some of this isn't as precise as the Russians want to make out. And the Russians just have been, you know, responding very badly to that, and they've sort of, you know, been very critical. But they've still led us a report, which is progress from where we were before. Their argument is, you accuse our media of taking our government line in an unquestioning way, yet the Pentagon does an unsubstantiated leak with no evidence to support what it said at all, and you report that. Well, that's not actually a bad point. So, you know, we've got to be as critical as anyone else. If the Pentagon say, well, 4 of these missiles landed in Iran, we have to say, well, where? You know, I have to believe the Pentagon, you know, has got like 1 million satellites over that area and knows precisely what's happening anyway. If you're going to say that, then you've got to back that up as well. So you've got this constant sort of balancing up. A lot of people like to believe that, you know, America is always on the side of right. Well, America is trying to do the right thing, but America will, certain parts of the American establishment will try and manipulate a story to their own ends. Everyone does that all the time. And you've got to be sensitive to that wherever you may encounter it. Just because it's not as egregious as, you know, some of the outright lying that we get from other countries elsewhere in the world, or outright hostility to the press, it is important as we present the evidence to the audience. You know, the Pentagon has claimed the following. It has presented the following pictures, or it has not been presented the following evidence. But I think it's important that we try and do that balancing act. And I think it varies from where you are. If you're the BBC, people always assume that there's going to be a sort of hidden BBC bias. I think it's fine that people watch CNN, think that we're going to have more US coverage, because why else would you watch CNN? There's the other channels around, and I'm totally fine with that. I actually actively became an American citizen. I like America, and I like what American stands for. I'm a first-generation immigrant, which is quite interesting actually when this immigrant story plays out, because, you know, all these different people talk about immigrants, and I'm like the best immigrant in the world. I'm like white, fat, middle-aged, you know, successful, and, you know, speak with a cool accent, so I'm fine. And the people sort of make that clear. We're not talking about you, we're talking about these other guys, you know. But I subscribe to America, all that America can be, because I think America is fundamentally an optimistic country. That's the main thing I like about America. There's many things I like about America, but what the key thing is that sense of optimism. And people will often sort of talk it down, but fundamentally Americans will always believe that things can get better. And to be optimistic is viewed as a positive. Sometimes in the UK, to be viewed as optimistic is viewed as being a bit naive, and to be viewed as skeptical is to be viewed as wise, and that sort of, you know, wears you down a little bit after a while. Sometimes, I mean, to be honest, on a day-to-day basis, those decisions get taken place by some of my sort of deputies or a level below that. But if it's a contentious issue, if the Russian government complains, or if there's a video that people, we had a video a couple of days ago, terrible video of a Palestinian guy killing these Jewish people, just drove over them and then stabbed them and everything, and, you know, we had to make a judgment on what we wanted to show. That was one of those horrible ones where you say, this video is horrible, but it's really important to show what, in this case, the Israelis are having to deal with. So, you know, we've got to show it in full. But so the big decisions get escalated to me, but sort of day to day. And I will pick stuff up. I mean, if I'm watching the air and I think something's phrased clumsily or one of the headlines is wrong, I just sort of say, you know, we need to phrase that better, or we can do better on that. Sir?
So ultimately, you know, profitability is most important, and that is ratings for ad revenue. How do you manage, you mentioned the audience is younger, how do you manage between, I guess, showing stories that aren't as popular, but keeping the integrity of the news, especially when you have these, you know, startup companies that are just running everything, no matter if it's true or not? How do you manage that?
Yeah. Well, I think you've got to understand what your brand represents. You're absolutely right about the importance of revenue and the importance of ad revenue. People often underestimate the importance of distribution revenue inside our group. That's actually 50% of our revenue, might be a bit more than that. And it's there every year. And that distribution revenue comes centered on the core values of CNN. People are only going to pay to have CNN as a service if they believe CNN is big on breaking news, is good on international news, is serious-minded about news, is attempting to balance things. There's always people who think you're swayed one way or the other, but you know, we don't adopt an ideological position on different things. So you balance it in that way. The other thing I would point out, and I often have this conversation inside my company with some producers who say, you know, it's a good story, but that's going to kill my audience at sort of 2:45 or whatever, is these stories are much more popular than you think. You know, the girls who were abducted in Nigeria, it's like, why would people in America care about 200 schoolgirls in Nigeria? That became a nationwide phenomenon, you know, free the girls. And also what I have now is some very powerful metrics. If I'm able to say, look at the Twitter response to this, look how many people are sort of favoriting this on Facebook, look how many times this story has been shared. There's a generation of people out there who are into this story. You may not fancy it, but you know, I've got some metric evidence that this isn't going to hurt you as much as you might think. And then part of it is also quite legitimate. I just can't turn around to my folks and say, what you're doing is important, so it doesn't matter if it's deadly dull. You know, we've got to work hard to make the important interesting. That's on us. I just can't just sort of, you know, browbeat someone into saying, well, you know, you've got to run it for guilt reasons. They've got to run it because they want to run it. Yes?
First of all, it was nice to hear you talk about the optimism of America, because as Georgia Bulldogs, we're not always that optimistic in things. You said you wouldn't hire someone again without asking them their most pivotal moment or their biggest screw up. What was yours?
I've got like about 3 or 4 I can use, depending on how much drink I've had and how comfortable I am in sharing it. I think there was a turning point moment for me was when I was at the BBC, and I was, there's no real, I'm just going to sound rather big-headed in saying this, but typical English that I would sort of preface it by saying that. I should say it in a more American way. I was on a remarkable run. I was just, everything I touched turned to gold. And it's true, I was like one of these young high flyers, and I was whistling through the BBC thing. It was a very big job in Northern Ireland. And part of the job was to relaunch of the nightly news show, the 6:30 news show, same as you get over here, 6:30, 7 o'clock. And I just relaunched the show, and it had been a terrific success elsewhere. And I was just, I was like 32 years old or whatever, and I was the youngest guy ever to do this, the only English guy ever to do that. And lots of people were telling me I was brilliant, and I was completely convinced that they were right. And so I was going to launch this show, and it had already been set up to launch when I got there. I didn't like it because I hadn't done it, so I didn't really think whether or not it was right. I just thought, well, that's not how I would have done it. So I worked hard and was very clever and got changes and changed the 2 anchors. And it's important to time this. This is 1995, and the IRA had just declared a ceasefire. So after 30 years of internal conflict, suddenly Northern Ireland was looking at a different kind of future. So the idea was we have this very grim Soviet-looking news show. We want something which is much more forward-looking, optimistic. And so, you know, we changed the set, we're going to change the music, we're going to change the graphics, we're going to change the presenters. And, you know, we were coming off the back of this terrible time, but we want to look to the future. So we did all of these, so I made all of these changes, and people were saying, well, is he the right anchor? I'm like, he'll be fine. Is she the right anchor? She's never anchored. She'll be fine, trust me, I know what I'm doing, they'll be fine. And then on the Friday, when the last day of the old show, the new show was launching on Monday, on that Friday, the IRA called off their ceasefire and let off a massive bomb in the business district in London. So I got this post-ceasefire Peace New Horizon show ready to go on Monday, and the war had just started again. So I was there thinking, drat. people were like, you know, I was like, oh God, this is terrible for my show. And someone said, well, it's terrible for Northern Ireland. And I'm sort of, yeah, that's bad also. And so we launched this show, and it just didn't work. The anchors didn't work, the look didn't work, the look and feel of it didn't work. Now, the reason why I say this is my biggest screw up, and you might think, oh, well, no, it wasn't your fault the IRA called off the ceasefire. It wasn't. And for a long time, I conned myself about that. Well, you know, I was just really super unlucky, and there was questionably ill fortune. But it wasn't anything to do with that, really. I was incredibly arrogant to assume I knew what that audience wanted out there when I've been there for like 3 or 4 months and the people in the newsroom there for 10, 15, 20 years telling me it wouldn't work. And I disregarded that. What the hell did I have to say not to do that? Why did I assume that people who hadn't anchored a TV show in any sort of substantive shape or form would be successful just because I believed that they would be? You know? Why did I assume that this fragile ceasefire would hold and I'd build back the farm on that? What basis did I have for that? What knowledge did I have for that? What insight did I have for that? So I was lumbered with a really big problem. And it didn't help that, you know, I was the cocky young hotshot who clearly screwed something up. And, you know, the people in Northern Ireland make sure I got that message every single time, you know? So it was in the local newspapers, on local TV, and I had a credibility issue inside the office with the folks who had been brought in to lead. And they were like, well, you know, you were supposed to be, you know, our sort of, you know, top choice. You were supposed to be the hot young coach. You were supposed to lead us on a drive. And look at us now. We're worse off than we ever were as a result of your mistakes. And I was like, yes, that's true. And how good does this feel? And the truth was, it felt terrible. And this is the days of, it was more faxes, 1995. So I actually lost some weight. I used to say it was the fax diet. Every day I'd get the overnights from the night before and couldn't eat for about 4 hours. But the reason why it was such a pivotal moment is it made me eventually ask some very tough questions about myself and the assumptions that I've made. But also, and this was probably the best part of it, was the rapprochement with the staff. I had to have a series of meetings with the staff and lunches with the staff in which I had to say, look, you know, I'm not as smart as I thought I was. I should have involved you more in this. If I'd have involved you before we did this launch, we wouldn't be where we are right now. But here is where we are, and we're going to have to work as a group to get out of it. And we did eventually turn it around, and you know, we got the right people in, and other people got involved. And a couple of people said to me that actually I came out of that process quite well. My boss, who was very supportive out there, said, you know, there's a more humble, greater level of humility, more listening person who's come out the other side of this. I was thinking I actually preferred being the arrogant bastard who won all the time, but actually I didn't, and I wouldn't have been able to, I mean, unduly sort of self-regarding, I wouldn't have been able to achieve what I subsequently achieved if not for that traumatic management leadership experience. I have no doubt about that. Now, there have been many more, and there have been a lot more at CNN, a lot more sort of recent, but that was like a life-changing moment, if you like, or a defining moment for me. So I've sort of exceeded my time by about 5 minutes. Thank you all very much for coming. Thanks for the engagement, and thanks for the invitation. And I'm going to go back to bed. Thank you.